The restaurant was the kind of place where you could hear a napkin drop. Soft piano music floated in the air, and every clink of silverware sounded polite and expensive. The lights were low, making the polished glasses and white tablecloths glow. People spoke in quiet murmurs, like they were sharing secrets. For Lucas, a young man in a crisp white shirt and black apron, it was just another Friday night shift. His feet ached a little, and he was counting down the minutes until he could clock out, go home, and just be a college student again. His eyes scanned the room out of habit, checking if anyone needed more water or their bill. That's when he saw them, over in the corner booth by the big window. A man in a very nice, simple suit was sitting with a boy in a wheelchair. The man looked familiar in a way Lucas couldn't quite place, maybe from a business magazine or something. He had a serious, tired face. But it was the boy who caught Lucas's attention. The boy, who looked about 9 or 10, was trying to move. His arms made small, jerky movements on the rests of his wheelchair. His head lolled to one side, but his eyes were bright and active, taking everything in. The man, his father, was leaning forward, speaking softly. He had a tablet on the table, showing some colorful cartoons, but the boy kept pushing it away with a weak, frustrated swipe. A small sound escaped the boy's throat, not quite a cry, but full of a feeling that was hard to name. It was the sound of someone who wanted to be somewhere else, doing something else, but couldn't find the way to say it. Lucas felt a familiar pinch in his heart. He wasn't just a server here. At school, he was studying to understand the minds of children, especially those who saw and felt the world differently. His textbooks talked about developmental disabilities and therapies. But right now, in this quiet, fancy restaurant, all that book learning faded away. He just saw a kid who was bored and upset, and a dad who was trying so hard, but looking more and more helpless. The father, Alistair, was indeed trying. He had built a whole empire by solving impossible problems, but here, with his son Leo, he often felt like he was failing. He had brought him here hoping the change of scene would help, but the stiff atmosphere was just another cage. Leo's whimpers felt like a physical pressure on his chest. He put a gentle hand on Leo's trembling arm. "It's okay, buddy. Just a little longer," he whispered, but the words felt empty. Lucas finished clearing a table nearby, stacking the plates quietly. As he turned to head back to the kitchen, the main door opened for a couple leaving. A burst of noise from the busy city street rushed in. For just a second, the sound of a car radio blasted clearly, the booming, happy bass line of Uptown Funk. The door swung shut, cutting the music off, returning the room to its quiet piano melody. But in that split second, something happened. Lucas, without even thinking, had bobbed his head to the catchy beat. It was a tiny movement, a reflex. And Leo saw it. Those bright, frustrated eyes locked onto Lucas. Then, Leo did something he hadn't done all night. He let out a short, sharp sound, but this one was different. It was a sound of recognition, of interest. Lucas stopped. He looked from the dying smile on his own face to the boy in the wheelchair. He saw the shift. The tension in Leo's small body seemed to pause, replaced by a spark of curiosity. Lucas forgot about the fancy restaurant. He forgot about the important-looking father. He just saw a kid who liked a good beat. He took a careful step toward the booth. He gave the father a small, respectful nod, but his smile was for Leo. "You heard that, huh?" he said, his voice friendly and low. "Pretty good groove." He crouched down a little, so he wasn't standing over Leo. He tapped the rhythm of the song on his own knees. A soft pat-pat tap-tap. Leo watched, utterly focused. Then, with great effort, Leo lifted his hand just an inch off the armrest and let it drop back down, trying to match the rhythm. A shaky, beautiful smile broke out on his face. Alistair watched this whole exchange like a man seeing magic for the first time. He had seen specialists, therapists, all sorts of experts. They used tools and charts and exercises. This young server with a kind face used a song from the street and a tap on his knees. And it worked. The cloud over Leo lifted, just like that. The helpless feeling in Alistair's own chest loosened its grip, replaced by a wave of pure wonder. That smile on the boy's face was like a light turning on in a dark room. It wasn't just a small grin. It was a full, bright expression that made his whole face glow. For Lucas, standing there in his server's apron, that smile was everything. It was a clear, happy signal saying, "Yes, I like this. More, please." The boy's father was completely still. The serious, tired look on his face had melted away, replaced by something else. It was surprise, of course, but mixed with a deep, warm relief. He was watching his son, not the server, and his eyes were shining a little. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His whole body was leaning forward, just taking in the sight of his happy child. Lucas felt a little rush of nerves now. He was still at work. This was a very fancy, very quiet place. The manager did not like any kind of fuss. But looking at the boy's eager eyes, those nerves just faded away. This felt more important than any rule about being quiet. "Man, that song really gets you, doesn't it?" Lucas said to the boy, keeping his voice cheerful but soft. He glanced at the father. "Sir, would it be all right if I?" He didn't even know how to finish the sentence. Asterisk. Would it be all right if I tried to make your son laugh? It sounded strange when he thought about it. The father blinked, as if coming back from a faraway thought. He looked from his son's hopeful face to Lucas's kind one. He gave a single, firm nod. "Please," he said, and the word came out thick with emotion. It was more of a whisper. If you have an idea." That was all the permission Lucas needed. He wasn't going to do a big show for the whole restaurant. This was just for the boy. He walked around to the side of the wheelchair. "Okay, my friend," he said. "Let's see if we can find that groove again." He pulled his phone from his pocket. His hands were a little clumsy, his fingers slipping as he searched for the song. He suddenly wished he had a better playlist. Finally, he found it. He didn't blast it. He turned the volume up just enough so the rhythm was clear and strong, but it wouldn't disturb the other tables too much. The first few horns of Uptown Funk started playing, tinny but energetic from the phone speaker. Lucas started moving. Not a big dance, just a smooth side-to-side step right there on the carpet. He snapped his fingers softly in time with the music. The boy, Leo, let out a joyful sound, a kind of happy shout. His body, which usually moved in stiff, uncontrolled ways, began to rock. It was a new rhythm, a purposeful one. He was trying to dance from his chair. Seeing this, Lucas got a brave idea. "You want to really move?" he asked with a grin. He carefully moved behind the wheelchair, gripping the handles. He looked at the father one more time for a final, "Okay." The father nodded again, his hand now covering his mouth. Gently, Lucas pushed the wheelchair forward a foot, then back. Then, in time with the funky beat, he began to turn the chair in a slow, smooth circle. He added little shakes and shimmies to the movement, making the chair part of the dance. He was dancing with the chair, with the boy inside it. He leaned down so his face was level with Leo's. "Come on, you got it," he encouraged, moving his own shoulders up and down. Leo, watching him so closely, tried to copy. His head bobbed. His shoulders jerked up in a happy, spastic rhythm that perfectly matched the music. He wasn't just being moved. He was dancing. His laughter filled their little corner of the restaurant, a real, bubbling, infectious sound. Lucas kept going. He let go of the chair and did a little two-step in front of Leo, making him laugh harder. Then he'd go back to spinning the chair. He used his hands to make big, silly waves in the air for Leo to follow with his eyes. For those 2 or 3 minutes, the expensive restaurant disappeared. The quiet piano music was gone, replaced by funky pop from a phone. The stiff atmosphere was broken by the pure sound of a child's delight. Other people in the restaurant had noticed now, but no one was complaining. An older couple at a nearby table had stopped eating. They were just watching, and both of them were smiling. One of the women had tears in her eyes. A younger couple watched with looks of pleasant surprise. They weren't staring in a rude way. They were watching a simple, beautiful moment of connection. The father, Alistair, watched his son become a different person. The frustration, the struggle, the closed-off feeling was gone. In its place was pure joy and freedom. His boy was at a party, and this kind young man was the DJ and the best dancer all in one. Alistair felt a tightness in his own throat. He realized, in a flash, that he had been trying so hard to fix things, to find therapies and solutions that he had forgotten about, just playing, about finding the fun. This server, in his simple act, had shown him something all the experts and books had not. The song began to wind down. Lucas did one last, slow spin with the chair and ended with a funny little bow right in front of Leo. The boy was breathless from laughing, his cheeks pink, his eyes sparkling like stars. The music stopped. The regular quiet of the restaurant rushed back in, but it felt different now. It felt warmer. Lucas, suddenly aware of where he was again, felt a blush creep up his neck. He quickly put his phone back in his pocket. He looked at the boy's father, a little worried. Maybe he had gone too far, but the man was just looking at his son, who was still riding the high of happiness, his body now relaxed and peaceful in his chair. Then the father turned his gaze to Lucas. There were no words for a moment. The look in his eyes said thank you in a language deeper than speech. It was a look of gratitude that went straight to the heart. The last notes of the song faded into the quiet hum of the restaurant. For a few seconds, it was like no one in the little corner knew what to do. The boy, Leo, was still buzzing with happy energy, a wide, soft smile on his face as he caught his breath. His body, which often seemed to fight against him, was loose and calm in his chair. Lucas stood up straight, the reality of the situation crashing back onto his shoulders. He was in the middle of a shift. He had just turned a quiet, fancy dining room into a tiny dance floor. His manager, a strict man who cared deeply about the ambience, was probably watching from somewhere. Lucas smoothed down his apron, a nervous habit. He gave the boy one last warm smile before turning to the father. I hope that was okay, sir," Lucas said, his voice lower now, touched with a hint of worry. He just really seemed to like the music. The father didn't answer right away. He was still looking at his son, watching the peaceful aftermath of the joy. When he finally turned his eyes to Lucas, they were different. The sharp, businesslike focus was gone. Now they were the eyes of a parent, full of a deep and profound emotion that was hard to name. It was gratitude, yes, but also something like awe. Okay? The father repeated, his voice rough. He cleared his throat. That was more than okay. He reached out and placed a steadying hand on his son's shoulder. Leo leaned into the touch, still smiling. You saw him. Truly saw him. Lucas nodded, feeling a little embarrassed by the intensity of the man's gaze. He's got great taste in music, Lucas said simply, trying to lighten the moment. The father shook his head slowly, as if Lucas didn't understand what he had just done. What's your name? He asked, his tone shifting. It became more direct, but not in a cold way. It was the voice of a man who was used to getting information, to understanding how things worked. "Lucas," the young server replied. "And you work here while you study?" The man pressed gently. He was putting the pieces together, looking at Lucas not just as a server, but as a person. "Yeah," Lucas said. He felt a familiar, slightly tired pride. "I'm at the university, studying psychology. I want to work with kids, maybe in therapy or something." He didn't usually share this with customers, but something about this man's attention made him want to explain himself. The father, Alistair, listened, nodding slowly. He looked at Lucas's face, his posture, the honest weariness in his eyes that spoke of long hours and hard work. He saw intelligence and, more importantly, a natural kindness that couldn't be taught. The young man had a textbook understanding of disabilities, but he had just demonstrated a master's level of human connection without even trying. Alistair turned and raised his hand, not with a snap, but with a simple, firm gesture that caught the attention of the restaurant's manager, who had indeed been observing the scene from a distance with a tense expression. The manager hurried over, his face a mask of professional concern. "Is everything satisfactory, Mr. Vance?" the manager asked, his voice a careful blend of respect and anxiety. He shot a quick questioning glance at Lucas Dot. Hearing the name Vance clicked in Lucas's mind. Alistair Vance, the tech billionaire, the man whose face was sometimes on the covers of magazines in the grocery store line. A flutter of real nerves went through him now. "Everything is more than satisfactory," Alistair Vance said. His voice was calm and carried a weight that filled the space around them. "I wanted to speak with you about your employee, Lucas." Lucas's heart sank. This was it. He was going to be complimented right before he was fired for causing a disturbance. He braced himself. Mr. Vance continued. "His empathy and instinct with my son were exceptional. Rare, in fact. In my experience, that kind of understanding is the most valuable commodity there is." The manager blinked, surprised. The script had flipped. "Oh, well, yes, of course. We're very proud of our staff," he stammered. Alistair Vance reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a simple, sleek business card holder. He took out a single card. It was plain, just his name and a phone number in elegant print. He held it out, not to the manager, but directly to Lucas. "Lucas," he said, "I would like to speak with you again. Not as a server, but as a student. As someone with a clear gift. Please take my card. Call this number on Monday morning. Ask for Evelyn. She will set up a time for us to talk." Lucas was stunned. His fingers, slightly damp from holding a water pitcher earlier, reached out and took the small rectangle of cardstock. It felt heavy in his hand. Thank you, sir. "I will," was all he could manage to say. Alistair Vance gave a final small nod, his business now complete. He turned his full attention back to his son, his posture softening instantly. "Ready to head home, champ?" he asked Leo, his voice now warm and light. "I think we've had enough excitement for one night." Leo made a happy, cooing sound, his eyes drifting from his father to Lucas and back again. As Mr. Vance began to carefully maneuver the wheelchair away from the table, he paused and looked back at Lucas one last time. "Thank you," he said again. And this time, the words were stripped bare of all his power and wealth. They were just two words from one person to another. "For the dance." And then they were gone, wheeling past the other tables, leaving Lucas standing alone in the suddenly very quiet aftermath. He looked down at the card in his hand. The other servers were looking at him with wide eyes. The manager was now looking at him with a new, curious respect. The rest of his shift passed in a blur. His mind was spinning faster than he had spun the wheelchair. Was this real? What did a billionaire want to talk to him about? Was it just a polite thank you, or something more? The card in his pocket felt like it was giving off a faint heat, a constant reminder of the strange, wonderful turn his ordinary night had taken. When he finally walked out into the cool night air after clocking out, the city noises felt different. The world felt bigger, full of possibilities he hadn't dared to imagine just a few hours before. He kept touching his pocket, making sure the card was still there. He had gone to work to serve meals, and he had ended up giving a moment of joy. And that simple act, it seemed, might have changed everything. The weekend passed for Lucas in a kind of slow, nervous haze. The business card sat on his small kitchen table, propped up against a salt shaker. It was just a piece of paper, but it felt like it was watching him. He went through his normal routines, studying in the library, doing his laundry, calling his mom, but his mind kept circling back to the restaurant, to the boy's laugh, and to the intense, grateful look in the father's eyes. He thought about not calling. Maybe it was just a polite gesture, a rich man's way of saying thank you without having to tip extra. The voice of doubt in his head was loud. Asterisk, who do you think you are? He's probably forgotten all about you. Asterisk, but then he would remember the father saying, that kind of understanding is the most valuable commodity there is. Those words didn't sound empty. They felt weighted, like a promise dot. So, on Monday morning, after his first class, Lucas found a quiet bench outside the lecture hall. His hands were a little sweaty. He took out his phone and the card. He stared at the number, took a deep breath, and dialed. It rang twice. Alistair Vance's office. This is Evelyn speaking. How may I help you? The voice on the other end was professional, crisp, and friendly. Hello, Lucas started, trying to sound more confident than he felt. My name is Lucas. Mr. Vance asked me to call and speak with you. We met on Friday evening. There was no pause, no confusion. Lucas, of course. Mr. Vance has asked me to set aside time for you this Wednesday at 10 in the morning. Does that work with your schedule? He was stunned by how easy it was. Wednesday? Yes, that works. Perfect, Evelyn said. She gave him the address of a well-known downtown office tower, the kind of glass and steel building he'd only ever walked past. Just come to the main lobby and check in at the Vance Industries desk. I'll have a pass waiting for you. When Wednesday came, Lucas wore the only tie he owned, a simple navy blue one that felt tight around his neck. The lobby of the office tower was like a movie set, all polished marble floors, soaring ceilings, and people in sharp suits moving with purpose. He felt very out of place in his slightly worn dress shoes. He gave his name at the massive, sleek reception desk, and a security guard handed him a visitor's badge with a barcode. Take elevator bank C to the top floor, the guard instructed. The elevator ride was silent and incredibly fast. The doors opened not into a busy office, but into a serene, quiet space with soft lighting and modern art on the walls. A woman with a kind smile, Evelyn, was waiting for him. Right this way, Lucas. He's expecting you. She led him down a hallway to a set of double doors. She opened one and gestured for him to enter. It wasn't a huge, overpowering office. It was spacious, with walls of windows showing the entire city below. But the desk was tidy, and in one corner there was a comfortable-looking sofa and a low table. And in that corner, sitting on the sofa, was Alistair Vance. He wasn't behind his big desk. He was waiting in the space meant for conversation. Lucas, thank you for coming, Mr. Vance said, standing up and shaking his hand. His grip was firm. Please sit. Can Evelyn get you some water? Coffee? Lucas just asked for water, his mouth dry. He sat on the edge of the sofa, trying to take it all in. Mr. Vance didn't waste time with small talk. He got straight to the point, but his tone was not harsh. It was focused. What you did for my son. I haven't seen him that openly joyful in a long time. You connected with him in a way that bypassed all the difficulties. You used music, movement, and a sheer lack of fear. You weren't worried about doing it right. You were just playing. Lucas nodded, listening intently. You told me you're studying psychology, Mr. Vance continued. Tell me why. What do you want to do? This was easier. Lucas could talk about this. He leaned forward a little. I want to work with kids who have special needs, sir, but I guess I'm less interested in just the clinical side. I'm interested in how to reach them, you know? How to find a door into their world, whether it's through art or music or play, whatever works. The textbooks are important, but I think sometimes the real connection happens outside of them. A light seemed to turn on in Mr. Vance's eyes. Exactly, he said, his voice gaining energy. That is the insight. The therapists are vital, but what you offered was different. It was human, spontaneous connection. That is a skill, and it should be nurtured. He paused, looking directly at Lucas. I've had my foundation look into your academic record. Your professors speak very highly of your empathy and dedication, but you're working 2 jobs to stay afloat. That's time and energy you can't put into your studies or into developing that gift. Lucas's heart began to beat harder. He didn't know where this was going. Mr. Vance picked up a simple folder from the table. I don't believe in handouts. I believe in investments. And I invest in people who see the world differently, who solve problems in new ways. I am investing in you, Lucas. He opened the folder and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a letter on official letterhead from the Alistair Vance Foundation. This is a grant, Mr. Vance explained. It will cover the full remaining cost of your tuition, your books, and a reasonable living stipend. No strings attached. Your only job is to be a student, to learn, to grow, to focus entirely on becoming the best you can be in this field. Lucas's eyes scanned the paper. The numbers made his head swim. It was more money than he had ever seen in one place, and it was meant for him. He couldn't speak, but that's just part 1, Mr. Vance said, a hint of a smile on his face. Part 2 is here. He slid a second page over. This one described a summer internship, but not just any internship. It was at the Child Development and Innovation Center, one of the most respected and forward-thinking pediatric therapy institutes in the country. It was notoriously hard to get into. This is a funded internship. They are expecting your application, but you still have to earn your spot. My foundation will just open the door. You will have to walk through it. Lucas looked from one life-changing document to the other. The weight of it all pressed down on him, not in a bad way, but in a way that made the room feel more real. This wasn't a dream. This was a choice being laid in his hands. I don't know what to say, Lucas stammered, his eyes getting hot. Thank you doesn't feel big enough. You don't have to say anything right now, Mr. Vance said softly. Take the papers. Talk to your family. Think about it. There is no rush. He stood up, signaling the meeting was coming to a close. What you gave my son was a moment of freedom. This, he gestured to the papers. This is my attempt to give you a little freedom, so you can learn how to give that same gift to others. Lucas stood, carefully gathering the pages. His hands were trembling. As he was led back to the elevator by Evelyn, the billionaire's final words echoed in his mind. This wasn't charity. It was an investment. And for the first time in his life, Lucas felt like his own future was something truly valuable. Lucas walked out of the gleaming office tower, the papers held tightly in a simple folder under his arm. The noise of the city, the honking cars, the chatter of people, the rumble of a bus felt different now. It wasn't just background noise. It felt like the soundtrack to a new life beginning. He didn't take the bus home. He walked, Needing the time to let everything settle in his mind, he called his mother first. Her reaction was a burst of happy tears and questions he couldn't fully answer yet. He told his closest friend, who just kept saying, "No way." "Seriously? No way." Over and over. The reality was slow to sink in. The grinding pressure of how to pay for next semester's books, the constant juggle of work schedules and study time. That mountain of worry was just gone. In its place was a wide open space, filled with a new kind of responsibility. He had to be worthy of this chance. A few days later, the story found its way onto the internet. Someone who had been in the restaurant that night had posted about it on a social media site. They didn't know names at first, just the heartwarming scene. A kind server dancing with a disabled boy while the billionaire father watched. But the internet is good at figuring things out. Soon, the details emerged. Alistair Vance, the reclusive tech giant, his son Leo, and a college student server named Lucas. The story went viral. It was shared thousands of times with crying emojis and heart symbols. News websites picked it up with headlines like, "A dance that changed a life." For a few days, Lucas's old life was completely overturned. Reporters called the restaurant trying to find him. His phone buzzed with messages from numbers he didn't know. He felt overwhelmed and stayed off the internet, focusing on his classes. He didn't want to be famous for a single moment of kindness. That moment felt private between him and Leo. Then, about a week after the story exploded, Alistair Vance did something unexpected. He didn't hide from the spotlight. Instead, he used it. He called a press conference. Lucas saw the news alert on his phone and watched it live, his heart in his throat. The billionaire stood at a podium, looking more like a father than a CEO. He acknowledged the story briefly. Yes, what people saw was real. "A young man named Lucas showed my son a simple moment of joy, something I will always be grateful for." He paused, his expression turning more serious, more driven. But this isn't just a feel-good story. It's a lesson. Lucas succeeded where so many systems fail because he led with his heart, not just a textbook. He used music and play tools that are free and universal. My question is, why aren't we investing more in this kind of connection? Then he announced it. The Leo Initiative. He explained that he was personally pledging $50 million to start it. The mission was twofold. First, to fund research and development of new, affordable technology that used music, rhythm, and interactive play to help children with physical and developmental challenges communicate and connect. Second, and just as important, to create training programs for parents, caregivers, and even medical students. Training that focused not just on the clinical aspects of care, but on the human art of engagement, how to find those moments of joy, how to dance in whatever way works. And Mr. Vance said, looking straight into the camera, "I have asked Lucas to serve as a student advisor on this project. His insight, born from genuine instinct, will be invaluable as we build this." Lucas watched, stunned. This was bigger than a scholarship. This was a movement. The man had taken a personal moment and was turning it into a force for good for countless other families. Weeks turned into months. Lucas, true to his word, threw himself into his studies with a new intensity. The internship application was rigorous, but he earned his spot. The summer he spent at the Child Development Center was the hardest and best work of his life. He learned from brilliant doctors and therapists, but he also found himself teaching them something too. In meetings, when discussions got too technical and abstract, he would gently ask, "But how would the child feel doing this? Would it feel like therapy, or could it feel like play?" He became the voice in the room that always brought things back to the human heart. He also began his advisory role with the Leo Initiative. He would sit in on planning meetings, often via video call. He felt young and inexperienced, but his suggestions were always listened to with deep respect. He suggested that the first wave of training should be free weekend workshops for parents, giving them simple, practical tools. He emphasized that the technology shouldn't look like medical equipment. It should look like toys, like fun. And through it all, a real friendship grew. He would sometimes be invited to the Vance family's home on weekends. It wasn't a formal thing. He would go over, and Alistair would make simple sandwiches, and they would all sit in the big, sunny living room. Lucas would bring his guitar sometimes, or just put on music. He and Leo had their own language now, built on smiles, familiar songs, and little hand games they had invented. Leo was thriving. The constant frustration that Lucas had first seen in the restaurant had eased. His world had grown bigger, filled with more ways to express himself. His father was different too. The lines of stress on his face were softer. He laughed more easily. The most powerful man in the room was often just a dad sitting on the floor, trying to follow his son's lead in a new game. One afternoon, as Lucas was packing up his guitar after playing for Leo, Alistair walked him to the door. "You know," the older man said, his voice thoughtful, "I've built companies worth billions. I've been called a visionary. But that night in the restaurant, I was out of ideas. You showed me a different kind of vision. You saw my son, not his condition." Lucas smiled, a little embarrassed. "I just saw a kid who liked a good beat." "That's the whole point," Alistair said, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "That's what the Leo Initiative is about. Teaching people to see the kid first. You started all this." As Lucas walked home that evening, he thought about the strange winding path that had brought him here. From a tired server in a quiet restaurant, to a student with a purpose, to a friend, to an advisor. He hadn't set out to change the world. He had just set out to make one little boy smile for a few minutes. But sometimes, he realized that's how the biggest changes begin. Not with a grand plan, but with a simple human connection. A moment of seeing someone, really seeing them, and meeting them exactly where they are. And maybe, if you're lucky enough, having the courage to share a dance.